Coming up on Windows Weekly, I, Micah Sargent, am in again for Leo Laporte. He will be back next week, but I am so excited to say I got to talk to Mary Jo Foley and Paul Thurrott about Microsoft Ignite. We kick things off talking about Mesh for Microsoft Teams. That's that Metaverse magic happening at the enterprise level, plus Microsoft Loop and the Fluid Framework, Microsoft Office getting some new AI features, and we couldn't have an episode without talking about Windows 11, of course, plus Mary Jo and Paul's thoughts on the Pixel 6 Pro, a little bit of Xbox news before we round things out with a back of the book, tips and picks. All of that coming up on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is episode 749 of Windows Weekly, recorded Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. A Demi-Skosh of Windows news. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. The U.S. Postal Service processes more than 98,000 address changes daily. Is your customer contact data up to date? Well, try Melissa's API in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. And by IT Pro TV. Start your IT career today by getting educated and certified for the big companies looking for IT professionals right now. Visit itpro.tv/windows for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use code WW30 at checkout. And by Akamai. Akamai powers and protects life online and is changing how we live, work, and play. See how Akamai is unleashing the Internet of Possibilities for the biggest brands in the world. Visit akamai.com/WW today to learn more. It's time for Windows Weekly. I, Micah Sargent, am in for Leo Laporte today. He will be back with you next week, but I have to say I'm very honored to be joining the Windows Weekly crew today because we're going to be talking about Microsoft Ignite. And of course, you know that means we are joined by two of the most wonderful Windows watchers in the world. It's Paul Thurrott of Thurrott.com. Hello, Paul.
Oh, I laughed when you said that. Hello. You are all so wonderful, Micah.
Well, thank you, Paul. And of course, Mary Jo Foley of allaboutmicrosoft.com. Hello, Mary Jo.
Hello, Micah.
It's good to see you both. Paul, you're back in your home office, I think, away from Paris now. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He seems very thrilled, very high energy for this episode. I'm all sorts of ignited.
Yeah, I'm ignited. I need to be ignited.
You're ignited. Nice.
Mary Jo, why don't you tell folks, because I got some feedback from the last episode saying, one of the things that's pretty cool is that Mary Jo and Paul take a moment to explain some of the things that maybe new watchers of the show wouldn't know about Microsoft or some of that. Can you explain, Mary Jo, what is Microsoft Ignite? Like, what is this conference about before we get into the nitty-gritty?
Yeah, sure. So before the pandemic, Ignite was a once-a-year show for IT pros and developers where Microsoft talks about all the new products and services that they already have in the market and a little look ahead at some of the things coming for that audience. During the pandemic, they split Ignite into two, so there have been two Ignites. There was like a spring Ignite this year, and this was a fall Ignite. We're not sure if they're going to go back to one next year. That would be my guess. But yeah, it's still the same audience, IT pros and developers. You hear a lot about Azure and you hear a lot about Dynamics, all my wheelhouse, basically, all the enterprise stuff that I cover. You don't hear a lot about Windows, but there was a little Windows news at this Ignite, so that was good.
A sprinkling.
Yeah. There was,
a sprinkling.
A smattering.
Yeah. A smattering. That's a good way of
this
putting it.
This
what
is
my
the
work would
pumpkin
call
spice
a
Ignite.
A Demi-Skosh of Windows news.
A Demi-Skosh. Wow. I like that.
Less
that might
than
be
a skosh.
The title. Somebody mark that down. A Demi-Skosh of Windows news.
What is a Demi-Skosh? Is that a thing?
Well, a skosh is just a little bit. So a Demi-Skosh is like half a skosh.
Like a pinch.
A partial skosh.
Oh, my God. This is like one of those recipes I find online.
This is well, Mary Jo and I are both writers. My wife and I are both writers. You can imagine the thrilling conversations we have, and these are the kind of things that come up.
Yeah.
Demi-Skosh.
Well, let's dig in. I know that everybody wants to. I'm sure they've seen these avatars popping up, and that I would say is probably the extent of most people's knowledge of one of the things that was. Oh, do you have something first?
If you don't mind, I just want to add something to Mary Jo's description of Ignite, which is absolutely correct. It's also it's a time for education, right? It's a time for people involved in the IT space, especially developers to a lesser degree. Obviously, developers have a standalone build conference as well, to learn about new stuff that matters to them at their jobs. And I there was a press briefing we had ahead of time that they gave to us that they really kind of highlighted that part of it. And I think it's useful to remember that, right? It's not just, hey, we arbitrarily decided in the first week of November to announce 1,100 new features for Microsoft 365 and Azure and whatever. I mean, they did that too, but it really is a moment it used to be a moment for people to travel, go to a place, talk to Microsoft engineers, product people, and learn more about the products that really matter to them and the products they're using in their day-to-day jobs. And now we do that virtually, but it really, I mean, I would just say centrally, it's about education. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, educate us, if you will, on these strange 3D avatars and what is all involved with Mesh for Microsoft Teams.
I can take a first stab at this.
Yeah.
So at Build, I believe it was, Microsoft announced this idea of Microsoft Mesh. And Mesh is the idea of creating an environment in mixed reality where you can actually interact first in avatar form and at some point in the future, they hope in hologram form. You know, the whole idea of holoportation so that you could teleport yourself as a hologram and be in a virtual environment and talk to people and interact with them, do demos and look at things together as if you were in the real world. Okay, so they announced that at Build. Now, at Ignite this week, they said, okay, one of the ways we're going to manifest this vision is by bringing Mesh to Teams, basically. So the way this looks is a little weird. It looks like cartoon characters with no lower half of their body, interacting in various virtual spaces that they've created to represent things like conference rooms or basically anything you want, a home, a retail store, whatever. Okay, so this is Microsoft's take on the metaverse, and we heard Facebook/Meta's take on this a week ago. The difference between that take and Microsoft's take is Microsoft's is all about the enterprise to start, right? So they even talk about the metaverse for the enterprise as a separate thing from the way Facebook talks about the metaverse, which is very
the metaprise, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
I will not, Paul.
Metaprise, right. The Starship Metaprise.
There you go, the Starship Metaprise. Oh, another good title for the show.
Okay, so at first this looks kind of ridiculous, but the idea is, especially for people who don't like to use their cameras in virtual meetings, you could be in a Teams meeting and be represented by an avatar with your expressions and gestures and just have that thing represent you in a meeting so that you don't have to be on camera all the time. Over time, they want it to be people actually interacting, together in other settings. So this is going to be a very gradually phased in thing. They're saying the preview of this is next year. It's nothing imminent for the rest of this year. I saw a lot of skepticism on Twitter about this when Microsoft was showing it, but also some excitement. Like some people saying, okay, you know what? They have this, capability now in Teams where you can all be in a coffee shop together. What do they call it again? Or you can be in a stadium. Yeah, I was just
trying to think of that name. It's not better to get. What's the name of that? It looks, you could be in the classroom or in a different
I'm like drawing a mental blank on what they call it.
Oh, it's sort of like a lens that you apply where it looks like you're all in a space together.
Is it together mode?
Together
it might be
mode,
called Together
right.
mode. Yeah.
It is. So Together mode is one way that Microsoft has tried to pioneer making meetings better so that it doesn't feel so horrible like you're in a grid and you see all their people and it's just like everybody looking bored, right? This is another way they're trying to bring some new way of interacting during a meeting together.
You know, back in whenever Build was, April, May, they brought out Alex Kipman. He was standing in some kind of a weird virtual aquarium and everyone was wondering what the heck was going on. Alex Kipman runs a lot of their, mixed reality HoloLens type stuff. So the interesting thing to me about, well, I guess there's a bunch of interesting things, but one of the interesting aspects of this is that there are 2D and 3D experiences. So the Together mode style thing is obviously 2D experience. It's on your screen. It emulates a real world environment. It's flat and whatever. I think we all, as I said on the show yesterday, I guess, or the other, whenever that was, yesterday, yes. Feels like 3 years ago.
It does.
I think we all suffer from a little bit of, camera fatigue these days. And I would today, for example, love to have an avatar here instead of me. That would be fantastic. But Microsoft seems intent on making some case for HoloLens and mixed reality in business. And this is one of those ways they'll do that. And I have to say, from the perspective of a virtual environment, as ponderous as headsets and things are, a 3D environment makes a lot more sense. Especially if it's a virtual space you can kind of move around in. They show people high-fiving each other and standing around a table, that kind of thing. And we've had things like this. I mean, you could argue that a 3D video game is a little bit like this, right. Basically realistic-looking avatars running around a military battlefield or whatever it is. So, it's plausible. It's unfortunate this happened right after the Meta thing because it sounds like Microsoft is in some way copying Facebook or whatever, but that's crazy. They've been working on this for a while.
So here's something that's really interesting. So when I saw this announcement, when we were put under NDA about it, I did a search and I'm like, has Microsoft ever talked about Metaverse before? Yes, they have, right? They talked about it at Build. A lot of us didn't really pick up on that, I feel like, but that's where they introduced the idea of the enterprise metaverse. There's a whole post about this from Build where they make the case that things like digital twins, Azure IoT, Synapse Analytics, Azure Maps, all these things that they already have in market, you could consider this building blocks for an enterprise metaverse. So I'm like, it wasn't Facebook who talked about this first. Microsoft talked about it months ago. We just didn't really kind of grok it, I guess, the way they were
because
this
is something they do. They casually throw out a word or a term. It's mixed in with a bunch of other technology gobbledygook terms that they use. I called out elasticity is one of my favorite Scott Guthrie words. It's not a Scott. I mean, the one that he happens to say a lot.
He uses that a lot. Yeah, he does.
He uses it a lot. I assume, by the way, that Neil Stephenson gets a $1 check every time anyone says the word Metaverse.
He should.
Yeah, I would hope so. But it's not. Look, it looks silly. And I think Mary Jo said that you only see the top half of their bodies. I'm sure in Mesh 2.0 we'll see the bottom half or something. Or
we have a little link in there. We have a link in our notes, Micah, if you want to show it in case people haven't seen this. I said, here's what this will look like.
This is what. Okay, let me send that over to John.
And you could see them moving around in this virtual space. It's odd.
So I hope you don't want anyone to see the heels you're wearing or whatever, because there aren't any.
Exactly.
At least not right away. I'm sure that's just a rendering issue.
A temporary thing. Same.
Yeah. But I think that's the point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think, so I certainly do get a little hung up on the top half of the body deal. But when I look at something like Bitmoji and Memoji and all of these different design your own avatar things, we're sending, some of us are sending those back and forth pretty regularly. And, the lower half of the body isn't there. I think that...
we're not looking at our lower halves of our bodies right now. We're at a meeting.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're just top avatars.
It would be a little weird if someone was looking under the table.
Indeed. Or if I was standing up in the full frame and walking back and forth as we're doing the show, that would be odd.
I don't remember exactly, but I would imagine like the Nintendo Mii characters probably look like little Weebles or something. This is very common, and for interacting and so forth, there's a need to see upper body. There's a need for hands and that kind of thing. Obviously faces and heads, but the technology is going to improve over time. If anything, it's a little goofy how cartoonish it is. I mean, for a business product, it's a little strange that it is this cartoonish.
So why it is, by the way? It's because they can't do the hologram part yet, just like with Mesh, right? When you saw them debut Mesh, it was all about people meeting in AltSpace VR, which Microsoft owns, right? And your cartoons, you're rendered as a cartoon character, basically, in that space. You're a custom avatar, quote unquote. It's not a hologram.
This is the natural conclusion of our careers, to turn into cartoon avatars and just drift off.
I want to be a cartoon. I want to have the cat face.
To the other.
And then people say, "Are you the cat?" I am.
No, Your Honor, I am not a cat.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just be computer generated, and even the words, our sort of conversations back and forth will also be computer generated. And they won't even know that we're not there. We're just sitting back in Paris having our sweet meats.
Sweet breads. Which are meats.
Anything else we want to say about Mesh? I mean, I know it's early days. When are we looking at, this actually rolling
next year,
out?
Preview for this next year, right?
This was the big one, but remember that this was also only one of approximately 90 new Teams features that were announced at Ignite as well. Which is
this was the one meant to be the glitzy one, right? Like every one of these shows, you have to have something where you're like, and here's the really glitzy thing. Right. May not be that practical or near term, but here it is because it demos really well. Here it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Teams. No, it's incredibly visual, but there's a lot more. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so you said the preview is coming out next year, or the version, like the actual thing is coming? Okay, gotcha. Preview first.
We aren't really sure, I don't think, when the final is.
Well, they said 2022, but that could be
I think that was
December 2022. Yeah, I mean, that could be a while. It will be available on PCs, phones, and mixed reality headsets, right? I think that's an important thing to remember. And that's a lot. That's true of so many Microsoft 365 type products where you can access it wherever you are. If it's on the web, there'll be a web version, client version on your phone if you're out in the world. And obviously for the few people and hopefully, maybe more over time who have mixed reality headsets as well.
Yeah.
All right.
It'll be interesting to see if when it actually comes out, if it makes people more convinced or less convinced that this is a good way to interact.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm curious about.
Is it actually viable as a Yeah, but you know what?
As a means of meeting.
This one's a little out there, but when Microsoft was essentially copying Slack when they first started making Teams, I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, do we really need another one of these things?
Yeah.
And Microsoft has turned Teams into something very special. That is this enormous platform. They mention it's a platform. I think every time they say the word Teams, I think it's a contractual obligation. It is. You have apps that run within it. There's a store. There are third parties and an incredible growing number of third parties that are building apps now. They announced like SAP, ServiceNow, the Atlassian Jira Cloud is in there now. And then, of course, all those new features. And we unfortunately, this is only a 2-hour show, so we can't do all of that. But we should mention at least a few of them. Like the shared channel meeting thing is very interesting.
Yeah.
They have, and this is some really huge features around webinars and broadcasting that build off of improvements they're making to other products. In PowerPoint, for example, they have this ability to have live video go through a presentation. So you can be in a circle or a square or whatever it is during a live presentation that you might be broadcasting with Teams. I mean, it's this incredible set of functionality.
Right.
And I wish I cared more about this because you could never stop writing about this if this is all you wanted to do. Because
you could have a blog called All About Teams, and every single day you would have stuff to write about.
Every single day. Yep. No problem at all. No, that's true. I'm sure someone does, and someone should.
I bet somebody does.
Such a rich area. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. What was you mentioned the first thing you said something about shared channels.
Shared channel meetings. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is channel meeting?
Yeah. So one of the big deals with Teams is that, the name tells you it's, teams in an organization, but they also have this notion. Well, we work with teams of at other places or people from other places, and how do we, allow those people to collaborate with us in teams, and so they've been kind of solving that kind of thing over time, and we have there's almost too much UI in Teams, but. If you look, let me just bring up Teams to look at it. You have like this, you have chats and calendars and files. You have all the apps you have, but there's also these, you could have specific chats or channels or whatever for specific team members. If you have whatever the size of your organization is, you obviously have teams within that group, and you might have little subs. It's like the commercial cloud at Microsoft. You can pick people from different parts of the company, make it a channel. And so you have private channels and standard channels, and now we have shared channels, right? With for external people as well. So it's just it's so hard to keep track of this stuff. I mean, I used to talk to the folks from Microsoft 365 about how complex their monthly announcements were that would span all of their products. But honestly, if you were to compare them side by side, I think Teams matches everything else at Microsoft 365 almost, right? It's almost that big.
Yeah. So the shared channels thing also goes by the name Teams Connect, which is the name they used, I think, this week. They've called it shared channels. They've called it Teams Connect. And now they talk about Teams Connect with shared channels, right? And like Paul said, it's about your different organizations being able to better collaborate, which will be great for me working with his company, Petri, because right now I have like guest access, but this is a whole different level where you actually inherit the security and the compliance settings when you're working together in one of these shared channels. And it's not just like I plug in as a guest. It's like you get a complete environment that kind of isolates you in a shared channel with all the security, privacy.
That's a great example. So even though Mary Jo doesn't work for my company, we want her to have control over certain things. Yes. And I don't know how effectively we'll implement this to be honest, but I mean, the idea is solid, right?
It is.
And and
they announced this shared channel thing months ago, and everybody was like, where is it? So now they said this week it's going to be in preview early next year. A lot of things kind of have gotten postponed or pushed back because of the pandemic or not, whatever, various reasons. But it's supposedly going to debut now in preview in Q1, I believe.
Okay.
All right.
But yeah, that's a pretty big, it was also a very big Teams announcement. Not as fancy as Mesh, but still.
Are there cartoon avatars for Teams Connect? That would kind of put it over the top.
Yeah, that would make people jump right on that, right?
All right. Anything else from Mesh, or do we want to talk about Loop?
We're good.
All of these buzzwords.
I know.
Mesh, Loop.
I always get a little idgety when Microsoft announces a new product name. It's like, oh, do we really, Microsoft Viva was the weird one from last year.
Yeah.
And now we have Loop. So before we discuss what it is. Loop. I have a question for you, Mary Jo, if you don't mind me asking this live. Would you say that Loop is based on fluid framework technology, or is literally the implementation of what we used to call fluid framework?
So it's different. I asked about this too.
Okay.
The thing called fluid framework still exists, and it's called fluid framework. Remember fluid framework from a couple years ago? This was the thing that was supposed to let you do really fast co-authoring, plus all this embedding of complex documents like lists, tables, all a variety kinds of things, agendas, where if one person updates it in one place and it's embedded in another document, it will just update like magic instantaneously. That was fluid framework. Then some months went by where we didn't hear anything about fluid framework.
Some years went by.
I know.
That's what it
I kept checking the GitHub because I'm like, does it still exist? Like, what's going on with this thing?
Right.
They just stopped talking about it. Well, this week they said, oh, by the way, we have rebranded things that we used to call fluid framework components as Loop components.
Right.
But fluid framework is still a thing. And we also have this thing that you we haven't talked to you about yet called Loop, the standalone app. So they're using the word loop for a lot of things. There's loop components, loop pages, loop spaces, and then the app known as Loop that doesn't have a former name because it's brand new.
2.5 years ago, I previewed a fluid framework app, which clearly has become Loop, right? So I think this is my confusion because I think, I'm sure you're correct, that fluid framework is kind of the technology behind this.
It is.
New product, but they had a basic version of it, which was basically what you're describing. It's kind of documentless. You can share it with other people, do real-time collaboration. You can bring in all kinds of content through components. And I think it's kind of hard to explain how it differs because literally it's been 2.5 years since I even looked at this. But to me, it seems like one of the, aside from the fact they have a brand now and whatever, there's an app coming. It's a two-way street too, right? So these Loop components aren't just, I'm going to bring in content from Word, Excel, or PowerPoint and put it into a Loop workspace, I think is the word. But you can also have Loop components in Word, Teams, Outlook, other apps as well. So in one of the videos they had, it was the same component. You can see it basically everywhere in Microsoft 365.
Yep. So the thing that you are finding confusing, and I did too, is I think it was Ignite in the spring, or maybe this summer they did this at Build. They demoed something like what you're describing. It was Whiteboard, the new Whiteboard app with Loop components, right? They didn't call it Loop. And so when I saw this announcement, I said, so wait, is this just Whiteboard plus Loop components? And that's what the Loop app is? And they said, no. And then to just make it even more crazy and blow your mind further, Whiteboard can be a component in the Loop, and there can be Loop Whiteboard. There can be Loopy
is
things in
what this
Whiteboard, like the reverse, right? So Whiteboard
that might
is
explain
one of the
name,
places.
by the way, because it's
the
circular.
Yeah,
right?
because you're automatically updating things. Yeah.
So, by the way, we have to have this conversation that we had 2.5 years ago, which is when you first hear this, you think, wait a minute, didn't we do this back in the 1990s? Wasn't this called OLE? Right, DDE first, Dynamic Data Exchange, and then OLE, Object Linking and Embedding, which just became a non-acronym over time with OLE 2.0. The idea here is that you have some source of data. It is shared somehow. Back in the day, we were just talking about on a computer between two different applications, Word and Excel. Today, we're talking about doing it over the internet, but the theory is the same. And you have this kind of component thing. You could bring up a Word document inside of an Excel spreadsheet or vice versa, right? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And when you edited that document, it happened live in the Excel document or the Excel spreadsheet as well, because they were linked. That was the linking part of that, right? So this is, again, conceptually, I do feel like these things are in the same, they're the same thing. I mean, they're not the same thing literally, obviously, but this is conceptually, spiritually, I think an extension of that. Yeah. I think it is.
It is. Now, here's the exact quote they gave me about the Whiteboard thing. I'm going to read it slowly because this is super confusing. In your Loop app, you will be able to create new whiteboards with a single click. Okay. That lets you do things like kick off a collaborative brainstorm session inside your Loop page. And because a whiteboard could be used as a Loop component, you will see that same whiteboard live and sync from within Teams, Outlook, or anywhere else where Loop components are supported. Yeah, okay. That's all I can tell you.
Wow.
Yeah. So speaking of the spiritual predecessor of Loop, anyone who's seen the app called Notion, which is kind of like a project management collaboration tool, you can see it by going to notion.so. Yeah, this looks exactly like that.
Mary Jo, I am shocked that you would level
You're
such a
shocked
charge
that I would even say that?
giant.
Yes. And so
I got to say, before you carry on, because I know you asked about this, I'm really interested to hear. But whenever you both first said this, I thought to myself, Micah, sometimes I know that Mary Jo and Paul feel a little bit jaded about the sort of history of Microsoft, and so maybe they are overestimating how much this looks like Notion. And so I went and looked for myself instead of just taking you at your word, and it literally looks just like Notion. So this is not even just a little bit.
Let's bring it around again, and just to be fair to Microsoft, 20 years ago they created something called OneNote, and OneNote conceptually has a lot of the same ideas. Obviously, it's at its heart a note-taking application, but I feel like there's this whole world of like Markdown-based note-taking applications that rose out of the iOS, iPadOS, macOS world, and that Notion is in some ways a more professional, project-oriented version of that kind of a thing. But really, the notion of embedding components of from other applications inside of a thing that in OneNote is called a note page or whatever it's called, we're really kind of talking about the same idea. OneNote is it's now a legacy application. It's interesting because whenever they announced that in the very early 2000s, it had been the first new big Office application in a while at that time, and today it's just like a thing that's been around forever. But it is very much a legacy application now, right? So I think when you move between the world of OneNote from 20 years ago and this new Metaverse, interconnected, Olay components in the cloud kind of thing, I'm sure they looked at, well, does it make sense to put this into something we already have? And I think what they arrived at was, no, we need to build a new application. And maybe then they grabbed the photocopiers and it was like, what's out there that looks, like something like what we want. But I don't think Microsoft looked at Notion and said, let's build this like they did with Slack and Teams. I think it was more of this bigger idea. Oh, here we go.
Unless it was like Slack. No, I mean, unless it was like Slack and they thought about buying them and kind of poked around and they're like, you know what, we can build this. We don't need to buy
So
them.
Mary Jo, I heard that you may have inquired about the similarities of Notion. You want to tell us about that?
Right. So I sent an email to Microsoft and I said, so this Loop thing looks exactly like this. And I linked Notion. And I'm like, is there a way you think it's different from Notion? And they said, oh, yes, it's different because unlike Notion, which is a standalone app, like Loop is, we also have these Loop components that are embeddable, and they can be embedded in Outlook, Teams, OneNote, and Whiteboard. So that's why we're different from Notion.
That's why?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Notion with a store? I was expecting something a little more technical than that.
No, they didn't like take on the idea like, are you differentiated from the Notion app? They didn't even take that question on. They just talked about how the word loop can be used in multiple ways to represent both a standalone app and the components. It's
always good when you reuse the same term for two different things.
Yeah.
It's not a path to confusion ever.
Right.
Okay.
So if you're wondering when you're going to see this, the first Loop components are going to start showing up in Teams and OneDrive, Office.com, and the Office mobile apps this month, like soon, right? Like things are going to start showing up in those apps.
This is kind of an odd thing to tell the world, especially since I haven't mentioned to Mary Jo yet, but I have spent a lot of time investigating alternatives to OneNote over the years. And especially recently, we are two people just putting notes into what I'll call a document, for lack of a better term. We cannot touch this thing at the same time. It will not work.
No.
They have not figured out real-time collaboration. We're not talking about a high-end enterprise with 1,100 people on a team trying to set some kind of a document straight. Yeah. No, this is just two people once a week, and man, do we have problems with it. So I have been looking around. I looked at Notion. That was one of the things I looked at. I will investigate this Loop thing as it occurs because I could imagine us transitioning to this simply because it may work better.
Don't you think it's overkill for us? So I feel like Notepad would be the perfect solution for us. I'm not joking. Not even joking. Like we just need to put some notes in there, right?
I agree with you. So here's the thing. So I think with any tool, Microsoft Word, for example, I often say I probably use 1% of Word's features, right? the fact that the other features are there don't kind of get in the way for me for the most part. One of the things I do like about OneNote is I'll say I start the notes that week or whatever. When you go in and you add things to it, you make changes to what I did. And sometimes you'll say, hey, do you mind if I move stuff around? And I never care about that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. But I can see it. It's kind of highlighted for me when you make changes. And I actually, I have to say, I kind of like it. You know, I like that kind of aspect of it. So yeah, I guess, yeah. So on one level, you could say, well, all we really need is text, right?
Right.
But the problem with, like, say, we really couldn't use Notepad is because you can't have hyperlinks in Notepad. And it's actually very helpful, I think, in the notes to have hyperlinks. So
it is.
You kind of think, well, what's the next step?
Very helpful for me, especially as the producer. I need those.
Yeah, you can't have hyperlinks as text, right? So that's the first thing, right? Like, well, why don't we just use a Word document? You know, well, you know, we could. I mean, we could, right? We could. That would be another approach. But I like this idea of a thing that is a container that has all our notes. We have notes going back to literally 2011, right? Which is goofy. We're never going to look at them again, but we can grab the structure of things. I like the idea. Maybe there's an event and maybe you want to play a video. We could embed a video there, and it would be easy to put that up on the screen, that kind of thing. So what I basically want is that thing. I referenced this before we started the show. I talked to Laura Butler, who used to run this part of Microsoft. And she was asking me at the time, and this was a couple of years ago, what would you think about she didn't say it this way, but she was basically talking about one of those new markdown-based note-taking kind of things. Like, is there some version of OneNote, I'm losing my mind, where it has all of the basic stuff that people want, but it's simpler, you know, and it's more attractive looking, and you can embed stuff and everything. And I was like, yeah, no, I said, I actively am seeking something like that. Yeah. And I feel like in one way,
OneNote Lite. OneNote Lite is what we need.
Right. Well, that was kind of the beauty of the Windows 10 version of the app. Yeah. It was kind of a less, you know, and I know for OneNote power users, they're like, oh, it doesn't have this. It doesn't have this. It doesn't have this. And for people like me and probably you, it was like, no, this is fine. This is, you know, totally now they're walking away from that. So anyway, but the point of this is simply, I look at this and I think this would solve a pain point that we have. It doesn't matter if we don't have to, you know, we need or most of its functionality, but if it's more attractive and simpler and actually works, for lack of a better term, that's something I'll look at. You know, if you don't mind. I mean, it's something I think we should look at.
No, what I thought you were going to say is, and I'm writing a version of OneNote that I'm calling Paul Note, and that's what we're going to start using.
No, it's all going to be based on Loop components, Mary Jo. It's the future.
You'll have whiteboards and whiteboards on whiteboards within whiteboards.
Exactly. Whiteboards within
like,
white
when you have a picture, like it looks like you're going down, like a picture of a mirror, and it just goes down into infinity. It's like that, except they're whiteboards, not mirrors.
Oh,
and
the other thing, I
can
forgot
never
to
be removed after you add them.
Right. No, and they gave us a little nice throwaway in their post about Loop. They said, by the way, at Build next year, we're going to talk about how third-party developers can build their own Loop components. I'm like, oh, Build is going to exist for another year. You know, there's always these rumors they're going to kill Build. They're going to kill off Build. Well, there will be a Build because they're going to talk about how to build Loop components.
So the other thing,
like that was kind of a wink.
Well, this is a concern, right? I think it's important that Microsoft have a separate Build conference. Mary Jo described Ignite accurately as for IT pros and developers. That's exactly how Microsoft says it. But, you know, from a percentage basis, it's probably like 10% developers. It's really not that much. Yeah. So one of the things I get a little nervous about is every Ignite, you kind of look at the developer conference and you think, man, or the content. If there's too much of it, it's like, oh, this is going to be a bad sign, you know? And for this year, there really wasn't that much, I didn't think. And good. You know, I guess you could lump the Power Automate stuff to technically sort of developer topic. You know, there was a few things, but they tend to do the developer stuff separately. You know, .NET is happening kind of outside of this. So I hope that continues, Build, that is.
Yeah. All right, we have so much more to talk about, and we will
what's going on?
Just after we take a little break. So I can tell you about Melissa, who are bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. Having accurate customer address data is crucial for the success of your business. And this is kind of a wild fact. Did you know that nearly 36 million address changes were processed by the USPS in 2020? That's a huge chunk of customers you'd be missing out on. 30% of customer data goes bad each year, but Melissa can help make sure your data is current and accurate. Melissa's tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years, which explains why more than 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. Melissa has a renewal rate of over 92%. And why is that? Well, because 25% is the typical ROI realized by Melissa customers. You can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. And Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. If you're tired of having duplicate customer information in your database, well, Melissa's data matching lets you eliminate clutter and duplicates. It will help you increase accuracy of your database and reduce postage and mailing costs. Get the information that completes your customer profiles better. You can add consumer demographic info to your records, such as marital status or social media handles. And Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. With flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options. And Melissa also has their new Lookups app on iOS and Google to search addresses, names, and more at your fingertips. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce its commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. That's SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliance. Melissa's Global Support Center also offers 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service-level agreement. So inquire today. In G2 Crowd's 2021 Grid Report, Melissa scored 89% for ease of use, 91% in quality of support, 96% in ease of doing business with, as well as 93% in meets requirements. So you can see their commitment to providing the best data quality and address verification software around. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. And of course, our thanks to Melissa for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. All right, we got Loopy, we got Fluid, we got Mesh and Meta. Now we're getting AI. We're going artificially intelligent.
Is there any other kind?
That's true.
We're going to get context IQ'd.
Oh, my word. What a name.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, another excellent title for the podcast, Atomic Unit of Productivity.
Oh, Lord. What does that even mean?
Don't ask. It's just not worth.
It's like digital transformation. Nothing.
It's a nonsense term that Microsoft made.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I thought if I had to pick the announcement, so there a lot of these announcements, you really have to like study them and reread and ask more questions. The one I found the most confusing was Context IQ of all of them. Mm-hmm. Context IQ, the way they describe it, is a, quote, set of natively integrated AI experiences that are going to work across Microsoft 365 and be baked into some of the Office apps. Okay. That's very generic, right? I wanted to know how Context IQ worked because what it does is it allows you to do all kinds of predictive capabilities. And it's going to start with the Microsoft Editor product, which is that add-in that corrects your grammar and your spelling across documents and the web and Outlook. So when they add Context IQ to this, it's going to do things like recommend to you while you're in a document or an email, hey, you might want to attach this file because the group of people you're working with, you've talked to them about this before and you didn't attach it, but you might want to attach this. Or if you tag somebody with an @ symbol, it'll say, do you mean this person? And do you also want to tag this person when you're talking about this? Because you've worked with them together on this before, and it seems like they're the ones you wanted to talk with in a group.
Man, the privacy implications of this are all over the map.
Yep. So it's obviously going to be opt-in, and companies will have to agree to, and employees, I'm sure too, will have to agree to go with this. A lot of this sounded to me like things Microsoft's announced in the past with Cortana and with things like Scheduler. Remember Scheduler? It's this app that used to be called calendar.help, where if you use this, it helps you find times that you can meet with somebody instead of going back and forth in an email like, can you meet at 11? No. How about 10? How about 9? And this app called Microsoft Scheduler does that for you. So I said to Microsoft, okay, how does Context IQ fit with things like Cortana and Scheduler? And what they said was, Context IQ is an ingredient of our AI capabilities, and those things you're talking about are products. Okay.
Oh my God.
So yeah, ingredient versus product. I said, how does Context IQ work? Like, what's underneath? Is it Cortana? And you're just not calling it out, and you're kind of
no, Mary Jo, it's more ingredients. Why do you ask questions like this?
Ingredients, like a recipe, right? No,
it's all ingredients.
One of the ingredients is Graph, the Graph API. Okay, the Microsoft Graph. That's good. But like, how? How does this work? They didn't really explain that, right? So there's this group of capabilities that are predictive, that are going to be coming to various Microsoft apps. It's going to be built right into the app, not something you have to add or an add-in. It's going to be inside the app when it finally shows up in product. And it'll automatically just start doing these predictions if it's turned on and if you agree to be using it. That's Context IQ. I know I did a terrible job explaining that, but I did better than they did.
I was going to say, I think
gonna
you did your best based on what you got from it. Context IQ. I mean, to an extent, it makes sense. As Paul was saying, the sort of privacy implications. Regardless of whether it's opt-in,
it's a business product, right?
It totally is a business product. So it is. Yeah.
That sidesteps that a little bit, but there's a creepy element to it. You can go back to things like, oh, it looks like you're trying to write a letter. Would you like some help? You know, that kind of thing. It's that slightly invasive weirdness where you're writing something and it says, oh, you might want to involve Mary Jo in this. It looks like, you wrote the words Windows Weekly. You must want Mary Jo to be part of this. Yeah. And it's like, yikes. I mean, so some of that stuff is a little weird, but that's
beer pick of the week. That's not your thing. Yeah. That's Mary Jo.
Exactly.
Why are you deleting it? Yep.
Yeah. It's all about the idea of making apps smarter, making AI an integrated part of things so that you don't even notice it's there. It just does things on your behalf. The whole idea that they've been pushing with Cortana is it's an assistant that does things on your behalf, right? And then when you finally get it, you're like, but do I want something doing that? Is that? I guess that's what a personal assistant, if you were rich enough or powerful enough to have one, would do for you, right? But
they would have to know all the gruesome details. That would be the point of their job,
They would, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be beneficial to talk to someone who uses this tool regularly, just to see kind of in context what they think about it, how they feel about it. I'm curious, outside of this presentation where it's being shown as, hey, here's this cool thing. Yeah. I want to know about how much of a productivity enhancer it truly can be, or if folks do find it creepy and end up shutting it off or ignoring it, or kind of how it plays in real life.
I think there's a bar too, just to getting used to that kind of thing. Mary Jo mentioned the calendar deal. Hey, we want to have a meeting next week. How's Tuesday? No, Tuesday's bad. Okay. How about Wednesday? Oh, no, Wednesday's bad. You kind of go back and forth. Yeah. It is nice if this thing in the background can see all of our schedules and say, here are the free times. Pick one. It's nice.
I was so skeptical. I was so skeptical of that until I used it with someone, and I was like, "This is a miracle!"
Like, okay,
wow,
yeah, that's cool. Right. Yeah. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
it makes sense that this would start at work, but knowing Microsoft, they're going to try to bring this to consumers at some point. And then we're going to have a really weird conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what?
But wait a minute, Paul. Don't you use Microsoft Editor for grammar and spell checking?
I use Grammarly because Grammarly actually works.
Oh, okay. Well, you actually are familiar with the concept, though, of having something look over your document and make recommendations. This is related to that, right? It's something.
Yeah, it is.
Looking at your words and trying to help.
Spelling is one thing. Grammar is one thing. Grammarly, like Microsoft does. Yeah, context. Exactly. There's an AI thing going on, like tone, right? You're writing a little aggressively here, buddy. Maybe you want to, scale that back. That kind of thing.
I bet you get that a lot, don't you?
Actually, I don't. At some point, it gets a little weird, right?
Weird.
And I think that's the area we're getting into because Microsoft has retroactively described things like spell checking as AI, even though it dates back to the 1980s and it was just a table match thing. It's not AI, whatever. But this stuff is, it to me, what this is it's tendrils into the Microsoft graph, which is that crazy. It's not a database. It's like a combination of data sources swirling around, making connections. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it other than the way we already have. It's obviously useful. It's potentially invasive and creepy. Yeah. I think some aspects of it, like the calendar thing, was a great scheduler, is a great example. You won't just get used to it. You're like, oh, this is better than what I was doing before. This actually does make sense. But the hurdle is we have to experience it first. And I think a lot of people are going to have these bad first reactions, like that Clippy thing, where you're like, please back off. There's also that Microsoft does this a lot. Grammarly does this a little bit, where this sense of we know better than you.
Right.
Just from a writing perspective, Microsoft Editor or Grammarly, there will be times you can lazily just think that it always knows best. But if you actually look sometimes, you're like, no, you're wrong. Like, this is not what you've suggested is wrong. And the choices are something like ignore for now, ignore forever, not you're wrong. This is the thing you think this is not correct. There's no way to give that feedback, right? Real AI would be able to take the feedback, not feel bad about it, and correct themselves going forward. And maybe we'll get there someday. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe.
What else? What other tools are coming to Microsoft Office? Yeah, I saw Clipchamp, Clipper.
Clipchamp is joining the Office family. We knew that.
Can I say real quick? When they announced this, we made fun of the name, and I believe we used a Windows Weekly headline or title.
We did.
That was us, butchering the name. In the beta version of the blog post, they butchered the name in exactly the same way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They actually screwed it up because it's a weird word, right?
It is.
Clipchamp. You want to say Clipchamp or Clipchamp or something? I don't know.
Yeah. So Clipchamp. Nope, I said it wrong. No, I said it right. Clipchamp is a video creation tool for simple videos for work and school. I saw somebody say it's the poor man's TikTok, quote unquote. I'm like, I don't know if I go that far. It's not exactly that. Right. It's a way to create simple, quick videos that they're going to embed somehow in the Office 365, Microsoft 365 plans. We don't know which ones or when, but they did say it's coming to the Office family, which we knew already. Right. I thought this was exciting. Excel gets more data types. All you Excel people out there, I'm sure you're excited about this. There's a new JavaScript API in Excel in preview, so you can build your own custom Excel data types with images, entities, arrays, and more. Right. So right now, there are certain set data types that Excel allows, and they've been expanding that with things like stocks and geography. But now, especially for businesses, this is going to be good. They can build their own custom data types.
So
this concerns me because
if you know anything about JavaScript, JavaScript it's not loosely typed. It's like anti-typed, and it's. JavaScript, you could take two letters and add them together in JavaScript. Like there's no. So I don't know. I'm sure, Microsoft has something called TypeScript, which is basically a typed version of JavaScript, right? So I suspect, I hope that the types you create in this JavaScript API are strictly typed, I guess is the word I'm looking for, or phrase.
Does this make it more possible for me to send an Excel file with some nasty JavaScript in it that could, do some bad stuff?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to say.
Injecting
but
it
knowing
into
Microsoft,
spreadsheets and stuff.
Exactly.
of course. Why else would you use JavaScript? No, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not. Microsoft has been working on web extensibility for all of their primary Office apps for a few years now, and I suspect this is a continuation of that trend. But no, I would imagine there must be security
implications,
sandboxing or whatever. Yeah, there has to be.
There must be. Yeah, they're not just going to let people throw stuff.
As long as there's nothing to the printer, you're good to go.
Exactly.
Yeah, just don't print. Just don't print. Yeah.
Don't try to print.
All right. Anything else from Microsoft Office, or does that take care of it?
Oh yeah, let me just look at the list real quick because there's some more stuff in here. I mean, the Windows 11 news was very light, just around deployment and management stuff. Windows 365 officially picks up Windows 11 compatibility. Also, maybe more important and less obvious, AAD or Azure Active Directory cloud joined PCs, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
Microsoft Edge, well, we have that separately, but coming to Linux, or is on Linux, I should say. I haven't seen this yet. In fact, I haven't even looked yet. But Office.com and the Office app for Windows, which are essentially the same kind of interface, are getting big visual updates. And that could be kind of interesting depending on where that goes, because it's actually a really useful interface.
I love that.
You
app.
mentioned the Excel.
I use it all the time.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I kind of wish the Windows 11 start menu was a little bit more like it, I'm hoping they kind of move that in that direction. We mentioned the Microsoft Editor, Context IQ stuff, and the Excel Java API stuff. PowerPoint got a bunch of new stuff, a new recording studio features coming for recording and sharing presentations, editing them, Cameo and Designer integration. And that feature I was talking about where you can, and actually it's part of what I just described, is the ability to broadcast a presentation where there's live video embedded in the presentation. Which is one of those things you're like, how did it not have this? But so there's a bunch of stuff just kind of happening broadly across Office / Microsoft 365, I guess.
Yep.
Got it. Anything else we want to mention there? I think that, I know you mentioned Viva briefly. I think that Viva Topics in particular is such a cool idea. It's the idea that, for folks who don't know, so Viva is like this employee experience management platform deal. Basically, somebody comes and joins your company, they can use this Viva system to learn more about the company. Right now, like with health checks, you can onboarding. You can answer these quiz questions every day about did you have a fever in the last 48 hours? But Viva Topics in particular, if I was at the head of a company, I would love this because I like the idea of having a knowledge base about the company that exists somewhere that then any employee can access. And so you've got all of these different processes, and unfortunately in onboarding, most of the time, not everything gets disseminated during that onboarding experience. So they show in this animated GIF here, somebody in Outlook writing a message, and while they're talking about a thing, up pops a little Viva Topics card, and it's about the thing that they are, discussing, which in this case is Team Awesome. So there's a team built into the wiki that has information about Team Awesome. But I just think about all the implications for having a database of information so that everybody in the company kind of, when you're talking about a specific thing, you're all on the same page. I think that part of it is cool. I don't really care about the rest of it, but Viva Topics in particular just seems like such a cool idea.
And it also, as it evolves, is going to let you know who are the experts in your company on a topic. So, sometimes you're like, who here would know about blah, right? And this will be like, here's the people who know about this thing. Here's a card for them, how you can get in touch with them, which could be cool too.
The news on Viva, by the way, is that it's now generally available, right?
Yeah, all the parts of it, right? Or as a suite are generally available. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. There are quite a few other things in that blog post. I think Paul. Power Platform, HoloLens, Azure Virtual Desktop, SQL Server 2022.
Yeah, it goes
Anything
on and on
else you want to mention?
Yeah. I want to mention Dynamics, of course.
Oh, no.
I'm ready.
Oh, go ahead.
So
go ahead. You
know
were
what you know what I'll say about this show this week? Dynamics was a bigger topic at this show than Azure was, which was very surprising. And it got higher billing. And the people who were speaking about Dynamics were ranked. I always I don't know if this is a thing they do, but if you look at the order in the keynotes of who presents when, I'm like, Dynamics way at the top. What the heck, right? So part of the reason is this is the 5th anniversary of the launch of Dynamics 365 this week. So it's a big milestone for that. They announced some new products and some new product names. Like the thing that used to be called Dynamics 365 Connected Store is now called Connected Spaces, which I think is way more confusing because it makes you think it's a virtual reality thing, but it's not. It's not that at all. Supply chain insights, customer service platform. Like there were a whole bunch of new bundles that they put together of Dynamics. That wasn't the most interesting thing, though. Power Platform licensing and pricing is finally getting fixed. If you talk to any licensing experts in the world of Microsoft and you say to them, what's the most confusing, horrible thing that Microsoft licenses and sells, and it's so confusing no one can figure it out, there are a million things you could answer that question with, but almost everyone will say Power Platform when you talk to them. It has been a horrible, horrible mess. But this year, it seems like somebody went in and said, guys, we got to fix this. Like, this is a disaster. And it's keeping the platform from growing because it's expensive, hard to figure out. And now they're finally starting to get these pieces together. So they already cut the price of Power Apps licensing and pricing back in October. But at the show, they announced this thing called pay-as-you-go pricing. So any developers you talk to who've built things with Power Apps say, you know what is hard? It's hard getting customers to estimate who needs all the premium features of something you built, how many people at your company are going to need it. And so it makes people kind of gun shy to try new things that are built with Power Apps. Now with this pay-as-you-go pricing, it's almost like the way you price and license Azure. It's a consumption basis kind of thing now. Everybody in the Power Apps world is like, this is a game changer. I saw people say this is the biggest announcement at Ignite. So yeah, if you care about Power Platform, go and look at the PAYG, pay-as-you-go stuff, because that is really big and it could change how many people try your app and what they think of your app and your company's willingness to have people develop more apps using the Power Platform.
And Power Platform, Power Apps, these are the low-code apps that Microsoft facilitates, right?
Thank you for not calling them no-code.
Low-code,
yeah,
no-code.
Yeah,
no-code is a lie.
Mostly.
It's like the cake in... what was that game?
Portal?
The cake is a lie.
Portal, thank you. Cake is a lie. No code is a lie.
Yeah.
But there's cake.
Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents. And it says...
Dataverse.
Now, these, I didn't realize these ran across all different systems. I thought it was specifically web.
No, you can build Power Apps for a lot of different platforms, I believe.
iOS and Android, it says.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's just I think what's held up Power Platform is, number one, it has the no code thing around it. So a lot of people go in and they're like, oh, I could build an app. I'm a citizen developer. And then you look and you're like, no, I can't do that. That's what I did. When Donna Sarkar, who used to work on that team, would say to me, you could build a Power App. And I looked at this, I'm like, are you kidding me? No, I couldn't. I don't know anything about this.
Right.
I think if you're somebody who's like an Excel somebody who develops things using Excel, or you understand the way programming works, you could do it, but I'm not that person, right? So I'm not that's why I'm like, no code isn't really true. Low code, yes. No code, no. Yeah. It
is easier if you're a developer, for sure, or if have some kind of background with that. Yeah.
Right.
It's true.
So the pricing was enough to make people who are using these pretty regularly go, holy moly, this changes everything.
Yeah.
And it's not that it was
It feels-
consolidated. It was just that it was lessened. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, at first in October, they cut the prices in half for a lot of the Power Apps plans, which was great. That was a start. But then with this new pay-as-you-go thing, it's like, yeah, and if you build an app and you want to figure out, how many people might use it, how do you license it as a company? Before you'd be like, oh, I have to pay an exorbitant amount up front to just see if people even want it, right?
Right.
I just
You
want
can't
to
do that.
I just want to repeat how much I enjoy Micah's common sense approach to these things that we just sort of take for granted. And he looks at them from the outside and it's like, why is this so stupid?
Why
it's
are
like
people doing this?
the licensing, the volume of the licensing is less. It's basically what you just asked. And it's like, there's less of it. It's like we haven't reduced prices. We've just made less licensing.
Oh my word.
It's such a Microsoft approach.
Yeah. They're trying to, whoever is over there right now figuring this out, thank you. Because up till now, like whenever anyone would ask me a Power Apps licensing question, I'd be like, I have no idea. And I don't think anybody else does either.
Here's my card. That's it.
You got to find somebody who knows.
Spin the wheel and see how much Bob's going to pay this month for Power Automate.
Even experts, even people who are, quote, experts or who actually are experts in the Power Platform, they didn't know either. Like you say to them, so like, how does this work? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm like, okay, good. No one knows how this works. Great.
Yeah.
All on the same page in not being on the same page, apparently.
Part of it comes in Windows 11. It must be free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What part is that?
Automate,
remote?
Power Automate.
No, what's it called? Power Automate. Yeah. The Power Automate stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Nope. They're doing a good job
right.
cleaning that up. It's good.
Do we want to talk?
An hour in, we were almost done with the first topic.
Yes, it's time for
But the first topic is the
Linux?
giant topic, so that's okay, right?
Oh, see, now with
this
this is interesting. With Power Automate, they do say no code. Power Apps, they don't. You can check the whole page. It all says low code.
Yeah.
They do not say the word no code. But with Power Automate, they do say no code. That one, I remember playing with Power Apps and Power Automate, and Power Automate was certainly a lot easier to understand. If you've ever used IFTTT or Zapier, it's a lot like one of those.
Yep.
Yeah, you just combine services and make alerts or whatever.
Yeah.
So Rachi is in the frame of the camera is the automation I set up with Power Automate.
He always is. Yesterday he snuck onto the scene. All of a sudden I had my door shut and we were filming for Ignite and I looked and the door was cracked open. I'm like, oh good, I think he's out there still. And all of a sudden he jumps up onto the desk in the middle of the thing and I take him and I just pushed him down. This is me. I'm like, whoa.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I was like, whoops, sorry, here he is.
Seed stealing cat.
I know, he's around.
Man.
He's always around.
Okay, so I don't know who made the Linux joke, but this is the time to do it because Leo's not here. So tell me about Microsoft Edge on Linux.
Oh, boy.
There's not much to say.
Well,
Edge is available on Linux, right?
The joke is Microsoft Edge is now stable on Linux, unlike most Linux users. Anybody?
Oh, that was Paul's joke. Anyone who wants to know, that was his joke, not mine.
Don't send Mary Jo emails.
Sorry, my kids would have left me hanging too. It's fine.
Yes.
Okay, well then that's all we have to say about that. Let's talk about Azure and
much,
security stuff.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All
the
right.
only security thing I wanted to call out. No, only one security thing to call out. Defender for Business. Right? Microsoft. So at the show, Microsoft they're branding everything in their security portfolio with Defender. Almost everything now in the security portfolio.
It's not confusing
is
at all. It's great.
No, Defender for something, right? Defender for Business is the SMB, small and mid-sized business offering that they are talking about. For businesses with up to 300 employees, they're going to build it into Microsoft 365 Business Premium. And if you don't have that, you could also just use it as a standalone offering, $3 per user per month. A lot of people are excited about this because people who are small, mid-sized businesses, they don't have a lot of readily available and already integrated into their way of working kinds of security products. So this is going to be a new offering in preview, I think starting soon, quote unquote soon. And it's just like it's like a lot of the other Defender products. It's a suite of things. It does threat management, vulnerability management, configuration management, automated investigation, all those things that you know and love from all your Defender products. So that's kind of exciting that they're bringing it to the SMB market.
Yeah.
There were a lot of other security announcements. I am not going to tackle any of them. As we said on the show yesterday at Ignite, I'm not a security expert. I'm like, yeah, none of us are here.
I don't even play one on TV.
No. Yeah. And Azure, I don't know. There was an announcement around bringing the GPT-3 model to Azure through this new service they're going to call OpenAI for Azure. But right now it's in a super, super limited preview. So I feel like it doesn't apply to many of the people listening to this podcast. But over time, as they expand this, it's basically taking the work that Microsoft's doing with OpenAI around really gigantic data models that you need for machine learning and those kinds of tasks, and making it available as a service inside of Azure. Kind of interesting also.
That sounded amazingly coherent. I have no idea what you just said, but that sounds great.
Like you said, we wave our hands a lot.
You did. That was amazing.
Yeah. Do some magic. Yeah, but I wanted to say, if you are someone who cares about the kind of news we've been talking about, you too can look at the exact same book of news that we look at as journalists. Just search for Book of News Ignite 2021, and you will see all the announcements listed in a very nice form on the web with all the links to all the blog posts, and you can read up on all
Just make sure it's the November one, not the March one, because remember, we had 2 Ignites this year.
That's right.
That was a little tricky for me when I was researching some stuff. I kept coming up with stories from March, right? Not from November.
You got to look for November Book of News, and all the announcements, and there were like 100 of them, are all there.
It's a big document.
Yeah.
Oh, and it has links to the actual blog post. So that's actually really nice. So if you want to the Linux thing, you're like, click here, and then you can learn more about Microsoft Edge on Linux.
Yes.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break before we come back with some stuff about Windows 11, Surface, Xbox, and of course, the back of the book. I do want to tell you that this episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by, you know him, we know him, it's IT Pro TV. Whether you're a seasoned IT professional or if you're someone looking to break into the world of IT, well, IT Pro TV is the community you need. Tim Broom and Don Pizzette created IT Pro TV because it was the training they wanted for themselves. With IT Pro TV, you can advance your career in a fun and creative way. They have 7 studios, and they're filming every day, Monday through Friday, with their enthusiastic edutainers. They have the most up-to-date content with every vendor and skill that you need to advance your IT career. Their courses go from the studio to their course library in 24 hours and are divided into 20 to 30-minute episodes. And if you're looking for something specific, well, their transcripts are searchable. That's one of my favorite things. The month of November, by the way, is AWS month at IT Pro TV. On November 4th at 2 p.m., you can check out the webinar Windows 365 Deep Dive with our friends at Nerdio. November 13th and 14th, they have a free weekend. So there are 3 free AWS courses available to free members, new AWS videos on the IT Pro TV YouTube channel, and AWS guests on the IT Pro TV podcast. And on November 18th at 2 p.m., they have a webinar on Cloud Data Protect on AWS featuring Tracy Pierce, Senior Security Consultant for AWS. Start your IT career today by getting educated and certified for the big companies looking for IT professionals right now. Visit itpro.tv/windows for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use code WW30. That's itpro.tv/windows and use code WW30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV. Build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. Thanks so much to IT Pro TV for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. And let's head into Windows 11 news.
Exciting. because none of that happened at Ignite, unfortunately. At least nothing major. The first bit is that most months we get data from AdDuplex that gives us a rough idea of which versions of Windows 10 people are running out in the world. And because Windows 11 was just released, we now have our first look at that. They actually included it previously the past couple of months, but that was just from the Insider program. So as of today, it's on almost 5% of PCs out in the world, so to speak. If you believe that there are 1.5 billion computers running Windows, and I don't know if that's high, low, or whatever, but it's about 72 million PCs. So not bad for, at the time of the report, about 3 weeks of availability. The other thing they point out is that over 90% of Windows 10 and 11 PCs out in the world are now running what we'll call new versions of Windows, meaning versions that were released in 2020 or 2021, which was kind of the point of that whole Windows as a service thing in the first place. So they're getting there. And then what else we got here? Oh, we have 2 builds, right? So last week they released, did we talk about this last week? There was a build last week that had the Microsoft account settings built into settings. Right. And the idea there is you don't have to go to the web to manage your Microsoft account. And so over time, they'll build that out right in Windows, which I think makes sense. And you can manage your Microsoft account settings from Windows. But the bigger thing happened today. I don't know if you saw this, Mary Jo, right as the show was starting. Yeah. They released a new build right to the dev channel. And they are bringing one of the features they promised in June, but didn't deliver, with the RTM release, which is that mute, unmute capability, that toggle right in the taskbar. And I don't remember when I did this, but very late September, maybe early October, I wrote a post that detailed all of the things they promised but weren't delivering. And this was kind of one of the ones I was like, man, this is really useful, right? Like kind of a global toggle. And so you see this kind of thing a lot in mobile OSs. The new version of Android gives you a little green light up in the corner when any app is using your microphone or camera. It's that kind of a thing. Just so you're kind of alerted that something is using your mic, and you can find out what that something is. You can mute it, or toggle it off right there. It's nice. That's good.
Yeah, I can't wait for this feature because I think it would be so helpful, right?
The goofy thing is if like right now during our call, if you're running Windows 11, there's a little microphone icon down in the taskbar. It doesn't do anything. Well, it does something. It goes to a settings page, but because they showed off this feature, I always want to click on it and see what and it doesn't do anything. At least not anything useful.
No.
Eventually it'll be used to mute everything, right? Like that's the idea of it, is that you can hit it and it will definitely mute your microphone across different apps.
It should globally mute the microphone if that's what you want. Yeah. It should. I don't know how that. I know you can't have, like, the video camera can't be used by 2 apps at the same time, for example. But microphone possibly could. I'm not sure how that works exactly, but I haven't installed it yet, so I'm curious to see how this works. So I think the initial version they just released today is only for Microsoft Teams, but it will bring in whatever apps over time. So it should work with everything.
It also is only rolling out gradually. So if you're an insider in dev, you may not see it right away.
Yeah.
Just a warning. So
that little bit of fun that they always do to us. Yep. A/B testing, I guess, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Yep. A big fan. Yeah. And then I'm not sure how long I've had it, but I finally reviewed the Surface Pro 8. And I just wanted to say, this is not my type of computer. I'm not really an artist, or I don't write by hand. I don't take notes or anything by hand. But I would say that this is the first version of Surface Pro that meets that Microsoft promise of, the tablet that can replace your laptop. And part of it is that it finally has an acceptable screen size. It's 13 inches, right? The previous versions were 12.3, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but most laptops or Ultrabooks or whatever are 13.3 inches. That's kind of the standard size. So it's very, very close to that. Keyboard, trackpad, awesome. Thunderbolt, never thought we were going to ever get that. Amazing. The screen improvements with internal components and the new pen that's Surface Slim Pen 2. With the haptics and everything. Again, this is not something I need. I spent a lot of time just drawing little pictures of trees and stuff, just to feel, just because if you don't really think about this much, but paper has a kind of a bumpy surface, really. And so when you the roller ball of a pen is kind of moving over that, it's actually kind of moving with the grain of the paper, and there's that kind of feedback that you get as you write with a real world object on a real piece of paper. And it's not perfect, but this I would say gives the closest or emulation, I guess, of that experience on a screen. It's kind of amazing. So it's excellent. It's just excellent. Mm-hmm. And very rarely do I ever get to write a review of any laptop where, you kind of do like a pro and con list at the end, and the con list is so slow, and it's just so short. It's almost nothing, right? They took away the micro SD card. It's not lappable, right? This is the Mary Jo thing. I'm pretty sure she invented this phrase.
I'm not the only one. Not the only one.
Well, no, I'm one too. So I'm 6 feet tall, but for whatever reason, the upper half of my legs is not particularly long. So I can't use this thing on my lap unless I want to be like a Tyrannosaurus or whatever. And bring in the arms, it just doesn't work for me for whatever reason. I mean, some people it does, but it's interesting. Like this form factor is very versatile. And for example, I do this, if I lay on a bed and use it, I can prop the machine up against the wall without having to open the kickstand. It just stands, because it's connected to the keyboard. When I was on a plane coming back from Paris, I did the same thing, except against the seat back. Right. And there are advantages to it as well. And of course you can just take off the keyboard and use it like a tablet, which has its own advantages, It's amazing. And I know it seems a little expensive. I think I pointed this out when they announced this. Honestly, when you compare it to the price of the Core i5 version of its predecessor, Surface Pro 7, it's actually less expensive. But whatever. It is a premium computer. You are going to pay up to $1,500 for a decent version of it. You will not be disappointed if you do that. It's a tremendous computer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Another tremendous computer that you can hold in your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to know. What do you think of that? We're talking of Pixel 6 Pro.
Yeah.
We both got one.
Have you taken lots of photos?
I've taken one photo.
How long have you had it?
So I got this on Monday. And this is when we were prepping for Ignite and everything. And I'm dying to take this around, and I just haven't had a chance at all. All I had time to do was set it up. And I have 2 complaints with it so far. It is heavy. This thing's heavy. It's totally covered with glass on both sides. And I had the Pixel 3 XL, which is a big phone. This is heavier. And it's heavier because it's taller and it's slightly thinner, maybe, but it's just more dense, right? It's just a very dense phone. And so at night when I'm looking at it in bed, which you should never do, I'm always scared I'm going to drop it.
You're going to crack your skull with it. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I also think the fingerprint reader is terrible on this.
It is terrible.
I took your advice and set up a same fingerprint to see if you can fix it. Yeah, no, terrible.
I know it does. The fingerprint reader is almost a crime against humanity. And the problem is it's an optical fingerprint reader. So meaning that it's basically taking a picture of your finger. You can see it lights up your finger. Your finger is red from it. Yeah, it's not very accurate. This is something that OnePlus and Samsung moved past years ago and have now moved on to superior technology that works really well. Here's what I'm holding out for. The camera that's on the front of this thing can do facial recognition. They did not build this into the software. They can, and I'm expecting them to add that in a future update because this fingerprint reader is so frustrating. It is. It almost makes me want to not use the phone. Like it's really bad.
I think I'm going to shut it off and just use a pin. I think that's what I'm going to do.
It's
that bad.
It's
bad. Really bad. I mean, I couldn't demo this accurately, but I can't tell you how many times because I'm used to these kinds of things working. And by the way, with the exception of Pixel 4, every other Pixel has had a rear-mounted fingerprint reader that has worked wonderfully.
Great. Yes.
Wonderfully. I just moved off of a Pixel 5a. That thing, the phone itself is just mid-range, nonsense. But the fingerprint reader, speedy, accurate, awesome.
Yep.
This in-screen thing is not good. But I'll tell you, so the weird, I've taken probably several hundred photos by this point. I was very eager to test the 4x optical zoom because 2.5 years ago, I had a Huawei that had 5x optical zoom with a little periscope kind of camera thing, and it was awesome. Mm-hmm. And I've been waiting for Pixel to do this. So 2.5 years later, they did. But the first telephoto shots I took, I just walking around my neighborhood, I'm like, these aren't that impressive. Like they didn't seem like they were much better than like just, a digital zoom. But I went to a concert last night, and the pictures I took at that I don't know if you saw my pictures on Facebook.
I did.
For a camera phone. We were in the 11th row or whatever. I never moved, but I did the various zoom levels, and those pictures came out great. Like last night is what convinced me that this was worth holding on to, because at first I was like, oh, I'm a little nervous about this finger thing, but the camera's job one for me. And the normal camera stuff, the stuff we've already had, like you've had, and we've had with other Pixels, is as good as it's ever been. I wouldn't say it's dramatically better, but the telephoto is what puts it over the top for me.
No, when you notice the improvement. My sister also got a Pixel 6. She didn't get the Pro. She sent me a picture of a bowl of Halloween candy that she took, and when you zoom in manually, the level of detail, I could read the tiniest print on the labels on like a mini Milky Way. I'm like, okay, I don't think I can do that on the 3XL.
So I did the same. So we were sitting in a bar last night watching the baseball game, and across the bar at the far end, there was a picture on the wall of a group of men standing all next to each, 7 or 8 of them. And I said, what do you think? And they were all, it was signed by every one of them signed it. So I thought, well, this must be a musical act, right? And I was thinking, like, what kind of act could have that many people in it? I was like, Chicago maybe, or, So I zoomed in on it, took a picture, zoomed in on the screen, and I could see it was Kansas. And Kansas, the band, written in, 14-point type normal. But from across the room, I took a picture of it, and I was like, okay, this is a good zoom. This is good. So, yeah. It is big and dense. You're right. I mean, I coming off the Pixel 5 and like your phone, it's dense. Dense is the perfect word.
It is.
It's not as heavy as an iPhone, the big iPhone, the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it's not as heavy as like whatever the Note Ultra 20 was or whatever. But that doesn't matter if you don't have those phones. It's big. I assume you get used to this.
Is beautiful. It is beautiful. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, and I like the curve. I didn't know if I would like the edges of it being curved, but it gives you more screen real estate. It does. And
you're right.
I'm keeping it for sure. It's funny that I have this and the Duo 2 at the same time, because the Duo 2 hardware is really great. But every time I pick up the Duo 2, I have to really think about how to use it. I'm like, how do I do this again? It's so not intuitive to me to use that thing ever. Like, how do I span an app again? How do I get rid of an app? And on this, it's just pretty much, even though I'm now running Android 12, it's just very intuitive. It is.
So we talked about this offline or whatever, but Mary Jo has a rich history of not noticing UI.
I don't.
So when she got the phone, she, I said, what do you think? And she's like, I don't see any difference in the software. And I'm like, come on. This it does like dynamic color off of the wallpaper. It's beautiful. And she's like, yeah, I see a little color here and there.
All the things you noticed right away with Android 12, I'm like, I don't even say, wait, is there a difference in the wallpaper? Is there? I don't know.
I think that's the reason to get Android 12. It's so great. I love that part.
I agree.
Fonts are nice.
I like the new tinting experience where
it makes you change the wallpaper just to see what it looks like.
It's like, oh, what happens if I make it look like this?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's neat.
I turned mine. I've got an older Pixel. I'm getting the Pixel 6, not the Pro, but just the 6, because I need to keep a foot in the Android ecosystem as well. Yeah. And I had an older Pixel that I upgraded, and I remember turning it on the other day, and I was like, oh, I love this version of Android 12. This is so nice. Yeah, I'm with you, Paul. I think that's a really fun feature.
Yep. It's a nice phone. And the one you got, I mean, the non-Pro version is $600. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know.
Right.
And mine is loaded up with all my Microsoft software. So it kind of is a Microsoft phone in a way.
Yeah.
Like I've got Office on here and Outlook and all the things that I would use if I had a Microsoft phone.
And all Mary Jo's Power Apps.
Exactly. All my custom Power Apps and my
Mary Jo asked me a
add-ins
question
to
about Microsoft
Excel.
Edge today. And she's like, hey, did you notice this Microsoft Edge on this phone? And I'm like, no, Mary Jo, like the rest of the planet, I use a real browser. No.
I'm like, have you been using Edge on your new Pixel? He's like, why would I do that? I'm like, come on, I'm trying to use it on the Pixel.
Just kidding. No, I'm joking. Edge is great, actually. And it's just as good as Chrome on.
I've been having some weird quirks with it on this phone, so that's why I was curious.
Yeah.
If you
Oh,
did
interesting.
Something. Yeah.
I use it when I use Elvis. I don't use Chrome. I use Edge. I think Edge is
Do you
great.
feel dirty doing that? Does that any problems?
No. I do my best to be as agnostically minded as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Mary
All
Jo,
right.
it's time to create some more Power Apps. Sit back and
I'll be back later.
Well, don't be going back too much later.
This
This is almost
This is short.
non-existent Xbox news.
Okay.
It's so
Excellent.
minor. It's real small. So it is the beginning of the month, right? And as every month switches over, Microsoft announces the new games with Gold, which of those games you get for free if you're an Xbox Live Gold member or an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate member, right? Two of them are usually like what I think of as legacy games. They can be OG Xbox games, Xbox 360 games, and the other two are modern games, meaning they could be Xbox One / Xbox Series X and S. So we have those. Nothing really sticks out here for me, honestly. Maybe Batman 2, Lego Batman 2, I should say, is probably the big one. I don't think I even have ever heard of the other three games, which are Moving Out, Kingdom 2 Crowns, and Rocket Knight. But together, that is about $80 worth of software or games that you would have to pay for otherwise. So it's kind of a neat little perk. But in bigger news, Microsoft had announced, I think last month, they were going to do a bunch of back-to-back game releases day and date on Xbox Game Pass, meaning as new games come out, they appear right on the service. So on the same day, and that's starting like right now. So the first half of November is amazing. The second half is going to be amazing. The first half of December we know is going to be amazing. That's when Halo comes out. So they just announced a bunch of stuff for the first half of the month, including that Minecraft version that has both the Java and Bedrock editions built in with a front end, so you can kind of choose between them, which is really cool. What is the other big one? Is Forza Horizon 5 is coming November 9th, so next week. And that's coming across, console, right? Xbox One and Xbox Series X and X, PC, and also cloud. And cloud in this case means what we used to call xCloud, the Xbox. It was kind of a hard time. Xbox Cloud Gaming, which is a feature of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. That's amazing. I mean, it's like for everyone's getting Forza Horizon 5 for the first half of this month. So, and then Grand Theft Auto, which version? Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. The definitive edition is coming on November 11th on console. So lots of good stuff there.
All right,
quick.
There's the update. Yeah. We've got the back of the book up next, but we'll take a quick break before we head into the back of the book. I want to tell you about Akamai. Yes, that's who's bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. Akamai powers and protects life online and is changing how we live, how we work, and how we play. If you want to be on the cutting edge of innovation, then you need to be operating at the edge of the internet. And nobody can get you there better than Akamai, because Akamai has 10 times the locations of the nearest competitor. That's more than 4,000 locations. So you are always closer to your end user with Akamai. Akamai has built the largest and most sophisticated edge platform in the world so that the biggest innovators can power and protect their greatest ambitions. Visit akamai.com/WW to see how Akamai powers and protects life online for your customers. Akamai stops some of the most dangerous threats launched at the internet and everyone online every day. Their unrivaled edge platform intelligence sees more internet conditions in order to avoid bottlenecks and defend at the edge. Its experts and threat researchers are on the front lines of protecting and delivering digital experiences. The proximity and scale helps developers build better apps and put experiences closer to their customers. And Akamai's industry-leading 0-second SLA and 100% platform availability means they have your back and are not afraid to stand behind their commitments. All Akamai-backed SLAs include time to mitigate, quality of mitigation, time to alert notifications, time to respond, time to access a mitigation resource, and individual TMM SLAs based on specific attack vectors. Wow, some very powerful stuff right there at the edge. In short, Akamai keeps your digital experiences closer to users than anyone and the threats farther away. With Akamai, you can provide the best possible experience for your customers. Your customers will get the content, the apps, the sites, and video they need without lag, interruption, or latency during unexpected traffic spikes. You can prepare for spikes in demand and optimize resources to provide the best experience for your customers. You will be amazed at Akamai's unparalleled performance, and you'll always be one network hop away from 85% of the world's internet users. Akamai gives you the power to innovate right at the edge because your logic and functions are deployed and active at the nearest proximity to your end users, so you're getting the fastest end user experience around the globe. Akamai makes it simple to build right at the edge using JavaScript so you can innovate in real time, and you get low latency access to data for custom code at the edge. Akamai can optimize your API traffic delivery for edge applications. Akamai is there powering, protecting digital experiences in a way that no one else can. You're getting 10 times the location of competitors for the fastest customer experience available, and you're getting the market leader in CDN, video delivery, web performance, DDoS prevention, web application firewall. Look, no one can compete with Akamai when it comes to setting you up for success and scalability online. So check out akamai.com/WW to learn how Akamai powers and protects life online. Give your customers the best possible experience online and see for yourself what life with Akamai is all about. That's akamai.com/WW. Thank you, Akamai, for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. Let's head into tips and picks.
Yeah, so I got up really early this morning for some god-awful reason. And, Mary Jo thanked me for making the notes early, whatever. But the real reason I did it was I had this idea, and I wanted to put it in the notes. And then when I got home, I wanted to test it to make sure it would work. And if you're into kind of Frankenstein monster, pointless technology experiments, this is a good one. If you have a Chromebook and that Chromebook supports Linux, right? I don't know that all of them do, but I would imagine most modern Chromebooks do. That means you can install Linux apps on your Chromebook. And because Edge was just released for Linux, that means you could install Microsoft Edge for Linux on your Chromebook and have what we used to dream of, which is I call it an Edge book, right? This notion a lot of us in the Microsoft space have often thought, hey, Microsoft should make something like a Chromebook, but have it run Microsoft Edge. Now, of course, it's not quite that. Obviously, it's still Chrome-based, and you can't make it the default browser and everything, but it may be interesting to kind of use this app. And it's actually really easy. You just install Linux. You have to install the Debian version. If you go to the Microsoft Edge download page on Microsoft.com, it will say, hey, this doesn't support Chrome OS, but don't worry about that. Just scroll down to where they have the other versions. And there are two Linux, I guess they're package managers that they support, .deb and RPM. And the one you want is .deb. You would download that, use the Files app, right click on it, install with Linux, install the thing, sign in with your Microsoft account. It works basically just like Edge on Windows. All your extensions will come over, your passwords, all that kind of stuff. So kind of just a way to make a Chromebook a little weirder, I guess. But it seems to work.
Can I say, though, you missed the opportunity to call this a Credge book. Get it?
A Credge book, yes.
Credge book.
Oh, that's even better. That's true.
Yeah, Credge book.
Just saying.
That's a good point. Okay, Credge book.
All right.
Credge book it is.
Credge book. And what about your app pick of the week?
Yeah, so today, Stardock released we'll call it the 1.0 version of Start 11, which is an app they've been testing. They've not really been testing, but they've been releasing. They released beta versions and then some RC versions. And now the final version is out. And this is the start menu replacement, right? So if you use Windows 11, I feel very strongly you might want to look into this. It's only $5.99. It fixes a lot of the problems with the default start menu in Windows 11, which, as many people know, has lost a lot of stuff or has some kind of goofy features that don't make sense. So it does that. It also brings back older start menu. So if you like the start menu from Windows 7, the start menu from Windows 8, God help you, the start menu from Windows 10, you can get all this back. You can go full screen if you want that. You can hide and improve the interface, hide parts of the interface or improve the interface in various ways. It also brings the right-click menu back to the taskbar. So you can do that thing so many of us want, which is to right-click the taskbar and have it actually do something. One of those things being give you access to Task Manager, right? And also the kind of window management features, cascade windows, stack windows, put them side by side, et cetera. So this is such a great and obvious piece of software, and it's fantastic. So I strongly recommend it. $5.99. Even if Microsoft completely fixes this thing within a year, it's worth getting for now, just to get stuff back that you missed.
All right. Mary Jo Foley, tell us about your enterprise pick of the week.
One of the things from Ignite I didn't mention when we were talking at the start of the show was Microsoft announced the next version of SQL Server on premises at Ignite. A lot of people have been saying, where's the next SQL Server? Are they going to do an on-prem SQL Server? Yes, they are. And it got announced at the show, SQL Server 2022 in private preview as of this week. The weirdest thing about this release is how Microsoft described it. The most Azure-enabled version of SQL Server. Okay, it's an on-prem product, but they're calling it the most Azure-enabled version. What does that mean? What it means is it's a lot like, this is my interpretation, a lot like Azure Stack HCI, which means you have an on-premises part and then it connects up to the cloud to give you access to cloud services. So you've got your SQL Server database on-prem, and then you can use things like Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. You can use the Ledger feature in Azure SQL Database and Azure Synapse Link. All of those things are going to be connected to SQL Server 2022. We don't know pricing. We don't know licensing. We don't know any of that yet because it's only in private preview. But given it, the name is 2022, I am assuming it will be out next year. So there you go. All you SQL Server people who are wondering. Also in database news, I hear, I don't know if Paul does, I still hear from a lot of people using Microsoft Access, even though that product is like 30 years old or something.
Sure.
Yeah. So at Ignite, Microsoft announced a public preview for access to connect to the Power Platform. This gives Access like a whole new lease on life, basically. It will now give you a way not to just connect to the Power Platform and do all your low-code stuff, but also you can access with Access Microsoft Dataverse. Dataverse, that's the thing that used to be called Common Data Service, which is kind of a database in and of itself. You can connect to Teams through Access, through this connector. I think people who have been holding on to Access and saying, I don't think they're ever going to modernize it or make it, connected to the cloud. Yes, they are doing that. And you get all the cloud things that Microsoft always talks about: security, mobility, new experiences, et cetera, et cetera. Look in the book of news. I think there's a listing for this if you want to get more details. You also can just do a search on Power Apps plus Microsoft Access, and you'll find a blog post with all the details about what you can do and what you will be able to do and how you can get into the preview. Double database pick for the enterprise pick.
I dig it. Now, a developer. Oh, we've got more than one pick of the week for developer, huh?
Yeah. So developer next week is a big week if you're in the Microsoft developer ecosystem. There's two virtual launches happening next week. First is Visual Studio 2022, which is November 8th. Microsoft's having a big virtual event for that, and you can go online and get the agenda, register, all those good things. There's also the .NET conference next week, and this is where Microsoft's going to officially launch .NET 6, another virtual event. You can go register. You can watch all the sessions online, all goodness, if you care about those things. But I made this the pick of the week today because Microsoft announced something kind of surprising, given they're having all this developer momentum next week. They announced today that Nat Friedman is leaving as the CEO of GitHub. Well, I should say Nat Friedman announced this. I'm sure Microsoft was like, yeah, not the best timing, but here we are. So Nat Friedman, he has been the CEO of Microsoft's GitHub division since Microsoft bought GitHub, I believe, which was in 2018. So he's been around for a while, and people really seem to like him. You know, when Microsoft first bought GitHub, there was a lot of angst among people in the development community, especially open source, thinking Microsoft was going to wreck GitHub and somehow close it off to open source. I don't know why they would do that, but there were fears of that. And under Nat Friedman, it's really, I think, gone super well for Microsoft, and developers have been very pleasantly surprised about the way he's run GitHub and all the things he's instituted in terms of new tools and new policies. And he's really been listening to the community. So I think a lot of people are going to be very sad to see him leave. He said he's going back to his startup roots. He said he's going back to his startup roots. Well, when you look at his tweets about this, it sounds like he's becoming a VC. That's my take about what's happening. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say that, but he said, hey, anyone who's got some cool new startup ideas, come and talk to me. I'm like, yeah, I bet he's going to be a VC, right? So yeah, why? I mean, I think it's just time, and he's ready to do something new. Now, the person who's taking over for him, I don't know this person firsthand. His name is Thomas Dohmke. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Dohmke, maybe? He is currently GitHub's chief product officer, and he joined Microsoft when Microsoft bought an app back in 2014 called Hockey App. It was an analytics app. And he, ever since then, has been working at Microsoft in the developer division, and now he is going to become the new CEO of GitHub on November 15th. So bye, Nat. Sorry.
Couldn't have waited for January 1st, huh?
Yeah, couldn't wait for January 1st.
Right on the eve of the .NET 6 launch.
Yeah. Almost made it.
Almost made it. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, let's cheers Nat Friedman with a beer pick of the week.
Yes. So tomorrow, November 4th, is International Stout Day. I didn't even know that was a thing, but yes, it is a thing. And there's so many great stouts, regular stouts, imperial stouts. And this time of year, I drink a lot of stouts. But recently I had one that sounds so weird, I had to tell all of you about it. It came from Finback, Brooklyn, called Red Velvet. It is a stout that's made with chocolate, vanilla, and cream cheese. Not kidding. They make it with cream cheese. I was scared when I saw it on the menu. Yeah, that sounds scary. But I was like, I have to try this. It's got cream cheese in it, and it's going to be either fantastic or terrible, right? It also was aged in bourbon barrels. It's the barrel-aged version. So when it came to the table, I was sharing it with two other people, and it was like hot fudge sauce in a glass, kind of. I mean, it was like so rich. It smells like chocolate, smells like bourbon. It was delicious, and surprisingly, only 12%. I thought it would be higher, given all the sugar and such, but it was delicious, but something you can only drink in very small quantities. So if I was picking a crazy stout for my beer pick of the week, I said, let me pick the Finback Red Velvet. There you go.
It sounds interesting. I have a complex about Red Velvet because basically it's a lie. In cake form, it's a lie. Okay, so Paul, you're going to tell me why it's not a lie?
It's because it's red. It's exactly chocolate cake, but red. But
it is.
This is a running gag I have with my daughter. It's like, look, Kelly, it's red velvet. She goes, this is chocolate cake. No, it's red velvet.
I hate it. I hate it so much in that form because that just like put food dye in it and that makes it some magical thing. But the concept here of chocolate, vanilla, and cream cheese all coming together. This sounds really fascinating. Although when you say rich, Mary Jo, do you also mean sweet? Like, does it actually, is it like sweet. Sugar on your tongue? Okay.
Well, the bourbon makes it kind of less sugary and more like strong tasting. Like when it came to the table, I smelled it. I'm like, whoa, that smells like a cup of bourbon. That's what it smells like.
Wow. It sounds so fascinating.
So funny.
It was very good. I shared it with two other people. One of them loved it. The other one was like, nope, not for me.
Nope.
Yeah. But yeah,
cool.
if drink a stout tomorrow, anyone who likes beer, in honor of International Stout Day.
I will have a
think we should
gluten-free
call this-
coffee stout tomorrow and be very
There you
happy
go.
about it.
I think
Yes.
this episode should be called Red Velvet.
Oh, God. The cake is a lie. That's what they were talking
is
about
a
in Portal
lie.
was red velvet
It's
cake.
chocolate cake perfected. I don't understand.
Oh, and see, here's the thing is that I used to, when I was a kid, I had a cake decorating business where I'd make these,
wow.
big old cakes like you see on the Food Network. And I used, frosting colors and things. And you have to buy a special kind of red food coloring because the standard red food coloring actually has a taste to it. And so just adding all of this red food dye to something to make it into... Anyway,
Something better.
don't get me started.
No, you know what? I've made a red velvet cake before with red wine. So
Oh, wow.
it doesn't turn it bright red, but it gives it a reddish tinge, and it's actually pretty good. It's pretty good.
It gives everyone who eats it a reddish tinge. So,
Indeed. All right, folks. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the very real Windows Weekly, unlike Red Velvet Cake, which is a very fake thing. We appreciate you joining us. And of course, Leo Laporte will be back next week. It was a pleasure to join you two the past 2 weeks to do Windows Weekly.
Yes.
Paul Thurrott of Thurrott.com. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And Mary Jo Foley of allaboutmicrosoft.com. Thank you as well.
Thanks, Micah. Thanks for doing the show with us. It was awesome.
Yeah, Ignite especially. It seems like every time Leo's out, there's some event that's happening in the Windows world, and so I always get lucky to join you for one of those things. It's a lot of fun. So thank you, everybody out there. You know how to find the show. You can head to twit.tv/WW to subscribe to Windows Weekly, or tune in every Wednesday if you want to watch the show live. Twit.tv/live. You should also check out Club Twit, because for $7 a month, you can be a part of Club Twit. It's twit.tv/Club Twit. To join, you get access to every single one of our shows, ad-free. You get your own little special feed of each show. You also get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has content you won't find anywhere else. It's before the show, after the show, above the show, under the show, et cetera, et cetera. And then you will also get access to the Discord server, where we've got us Twit folks, as well as your fellow Club Twit members hanging out. So if that sounds good to you, twit.tv/Club Twit to check that out. Until next time, I have been and will continue to be Micah Sargent. This has been Windows Weekly, and we thank you for your time. Goodbye. If you find yourself talking to those virtual assistants in your house quite often, or maybe you can make your light turn on and off with the touch of a button, well, Smart Tech Today is the show for you. Join Matthew Casanelli and myself, Micah Sargent, every week as we talk all about smart stuff and the fun that comes along with it.